Katelyn Nacon, thank you so much for coming on. How are you?
No, I'm great. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
No worries, it's amazing to have you on. I mean, you've done so many incredible things and can't wait for the convo to get started.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
Yeah,
so
yeah,
much. I'm excited. I'm excited to hop in
yeah. I
it.
mean, how have you been? Have you been busy? Are you working at the moment? What's been going on with you?
Not I this year I've done a lot of projects with my friends. Ever since the strikes, things have been slowly getting back and started.
Mm.
But yeah, I did a feature-length film with my friend Shane Brady, and Chandler Riggs is actually in that as
Okay.
well.
Oh, wow.
Um, so that's in post-production right now. So I'm very excited to be able to see that. And then I've done a few shorts as well. One with my my boyfriend and Chandler actually started a production company together. So they just filmed, I
Wow.
think, their second short together. And so I was a part of that. And then another project that I did, a short film with through a friend that
Yeah.
I met through one of my acting classes. So a couple
Wow.
shorts, a little feature.
Awesome.
It's been really nice to do some creative projects with some really talented people that I'm close to in them.
Yeah, I mean, that must feel awkward working with your boyfriend and on-screen boyfriend at the time, anyway. You would see, yeah.
Luckily, they've known each other for, oh God, like 3, 4 years now.
Mm,
So there's no awkwardness at
mm.
all. No.
Fair enough. We'll have to get into a bit about the projects a bit later, and maybe you can share
Yeah.
some stuff about it. But what made you choose to start acting, when you started? Like, what was your inspiration behind it? How did it all begin for you? Yeah,
Well, I was very much into singing and dancing as a
yeah.
kid. So my parents were just trying to, feed my creative hunger, and I ended up started doing musical theater. And that's kind of how I was introduced to acting. I really had no interest in it. I was more interested in the singing aspect of it. Um, and then through musical theater, I took during one of these like theater camps one year, they had an on-screen acting class, and I took that. It was with John D'Aquino. And I remember whenever I was doing theater, they were always like, be bigger, be bigger. And this was the first time where they were like, oh, no, what you're doing is good. Just
Mm,
tweak it and stuff like that. And I was like, oh my God, this makes so much more sense than what I've been doing. Like, I feel like this fits me a lot more than what I have been doing. I still love musical theater, um, but I think there was something in on-screen acting that I hadn't discovered before, and it fed a certain part of me that was very fulfilling.
mm.
And it kind of just blossomed from there. I just, kept taking classes and learning until eventually one day it started working out at least a little bit.
Mm. Wow, so it seems like you always wanted to act from the beginning, then it seems like that's something you've always wanted to do.
Yeah, I was always very creative. I was
Mm,
always a bit of a, I don't know, I was a bit of a showman, even when I like, because I was very like confident and outgoing when I was very little. And then like I think around middle school, I got super, super shy, but I would always love performing and singing and dancing
mm,
and all of it. It was very rare for me to get shy around that stuff.
mm. It's interesting, isn't it, what can make us sort of feel confident, even though we
Yeah,
still have this shyness about us, like in different ways. It's weird how we can overcome that in,
yeah.
different careers. Yeah.
It trust me, it baffles me.
Yeah.
To be shy speaking in a room one moment, but then you can, perform this, gut wrenching, sobbing monologue in front of thousands of people just staring at you.
Mm.
It's bizarre that it works that way. It shouldn't, but it
Yeah.
does.
Yeah, no, interesting. Did you ever consider any other career paths like outside of acting? I know you mentioned sort of like theatre as well. But yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I've always sang. I write music, but there really was no other career path. I mean, my whole family are engineers. So my mom, my dad, my brother, everyone's an engineer.
Mm,
So honestly, like if I never found acting or if it just wasn't quite right for me, or it didn't you know bring such light and joy into my life, then I
Mm.
probably would have gone into something in the math and science. I always enjoyed that in school.
Okay.
um, and my whole family did it, so I probably would have just followed the path, if that makes sense. But
Yeah.
I found something else that worked, and my parents saw it in me, and they put everything in it to try to make it work for me.
Mhm.
And I think their work paid off for sure.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I bet. So you had their support then. They seem to have.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
They were definitely still huge on education. Like
Mm.
I still went to high school. And I started college, and then it wasn't able to work because I was working two jobs in two different states
Mm.
during the start. But they're always huge on education. And as long as I was getting good grades and everything, that's all that matters. But like if my career wouldn't have started if it wasn't for them. Like they put so many hours
Yeah.
into what I love. They told people they were going to treat it like as if I wanted to play tennis or any other sport. You pay for the best lessons you can get. You travel and take them to any practices or tournaments that they need to be a part of. Like you put everything in order to see if this is something that can work for them. And they
Mm.
did that. It
Well, I
was
mean,
very,
yeah, it's nice to have their backup, really.
mm.
It's a good thing. Do you work like, do you have a day-to-day job or not really, or do you just sort of stick to acting, just out of curiosity?
No, it's mainly just acting.
Mm.
I'm lucky enough to be able to do that.
Yeah, like full
I
time.
attend conventions as well, which is
Mm.
really great to be able to meet so many different people. But it's mainly this, which is
Mm.
is kind of hard to say.
Yeah, yeah, no, of
I'm
course.
very lucky to be able to.
Mm. How do you prepare for like auditions? Like, do you have a specific routine? Because you said about being shy as well, so that must be a really challenge. Um,
Yeah, it's so interesting because when I first moved out here, a lot of the auditions were in person, and
mm,
those can be a bit rattling. I remember the first in-person one I ever did, it was the worst. It was the worst audition ever. I like
okay.
forgot all my lines. I was so terrified. It was
Yeah.
so, so bad. But eventually you get used to it, and you kind of figure out certain things to say at the top, and like just how to make it work for yourself. Obviously, the more you do anything, the better you're going to get at it.
Mm,
The more hours you put in, the better you're going to be. And a lot of my auditions were in person, and I learned how to make it work. And now everything's basically on tape. So you tape an
yeah.
audition and you send it in, and you get all the time in the world, all the takes you need.
Mm,
So it's definitely a very different process. When prepping for an audition, I mean, I basically, if it comes with a script, you read the script. Um, Majority of the time, it doesn't, and you kind of have to make conclusions based off the information that you're given about the character, and you just do a quick little rundown of who they are, what they want, what they need in the scene, and memorize those lines. And
yeah.
that's kind of about it. I
Yeah.
think once it gets past the audition phase is when you're able to
Oh,
put more time.
yeah. And just
Well, auditions, it depends, but sometimes you'll get a night to be able to look over all of it and prep it. I remember there was one time I had like 7 auditions all due within like a 3-day span. And so you
wow.
just have to like pump it out as best as you can.
Wow. You got some good management behind you then.
Yeah,
Yeah.
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 Very much so, yeah.
And to be fair, I bet the lines are very challenging to remember as well, to process all that.
Yeah, it's so weird. It's definitely a muscle that
Mm,
you build. Again, the more hours you do something, the better you're gonna get. Like I struggled at memorizing like definitions for vocab, but when it came to like memorizing a page long monologue, I could do it like that. It's very odd
okay.
how the brain can adapt to certain situations. So now, like memorizing, it doesn't take long at all. But I was also, when I first started as a kid, the words would always get in my way. And
Mm,
so I just needed to have the words memorized so that I didn't have to think about them at all and I could focus on everything else that I was trying to do in the scene. So I think my body was really quick to try to build that muscle so I wouldn't have to worry about it.
yeah. Wow, it's just incredible. It's amazing, really. How did you land your first acting role? Was it through, auditioning? Was it word of mouth? Yeah, how did the first gig ever come along?
The first one, I mean, if we're talking about like the very, very, very first one, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, or around Atlanta, Georgia. And we have a pretty big film school there. I think it's SCAD. It's been a long time.
Mm,
But every year or like twice a year, they would do student films. And so actors could go and audition. And try to get in a student film. And so I think that was really my first ever like acting job was in a student film from SCAD. And I think we filmed in the Rocky Mountains for this little short film. And it was a lot of fun.
mm.
My dad was he had me on like Actors Access, like, he had me on every platform trying to search and scour for any job possible to like
Wow,
just to get the ball rolling. And that was before I had representation. And then I think I started when I was like 11 or 12, and then I got representation around 13 years
wow.
old.
Well, I mean, it's quite hard to search online for things as well these days because there's so much on there. It's like how do you trust, the right agency or the right place you need to be or yeah,
Yeah.
it's quite overwhelming when you read it online.
Luckily, one of the workshops I took as a kid, they also had workshops for parents as well to
Yeah.
kind of help show them like these are the platforms that you should be using. Like these are the things that you should have set up for a kid, headshots, resume, like this is how you format it and stuff like that. So like my parents definitely did their work to like educate themselves on what they need to have prepared. They're engineers, so
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they're
Professionals.
going to have a plan set
Yeah.
for it. Yeah.
Well, you sound like you're proud of them for
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I was a kid, like the
Mm,
fact that I was able to achieve what I was able to do. Yes, I put in a lot of hard work and I really did love it, and that's why. And I put in a lot of time and energy, but it's huge.
mm,
There's so much you need to know about it, and there's so much you can't do as a kid. And so they were working full-time jobs, but they still made it a priority, which was,
mm,
they didn't have to do that.
yeah. Well, have you ever turned down a role at all throughout your career? Have you ever turned down any jobs? And what goes into making that decision, would you say?
I think only like I mean, there's been a few times,
Mm,
but I don't get like offered a lot of things much. I've turned down auditions that I just either I'm not comfortable with the content or um, I don't have enough time to do it, or
yeah, yeah.
which is very, very rare. I usually try to find time to do it.
Mm,
Um, but it's usually like the content if I'm not comfortable with what it's about, or if the writing isn't quite right or something like that. It's 9 times out of 10 though, I do the audition anyways, just
yeah.
because I would like people to see me in as many lights as they can.
Mm,
Um, but yeah, it's usually if I turn something down, it's usually always content based where I'm like, okay, I'm not
yeah, yeah.
doing that.
Yeah, a lot of people ask for too much
Yeah, yeah,
in
yeah,
certain ways. Yeah.
yeah.
Um, how do you approach developing the personality and emotions of a character, switching between roles and jobs and yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially when I first started when I was younger, a lot of it was kind of, I guess, intuition based. Like I mean, really what I would do is I would be like, okay, what would I do if I grew up like this character and I was put in this situation? How would I react? And that's kind of how I went, with Enid and Walking Dead, was like, okay, if I watched my parents get murdered in front of my eyes and had to survive on my own and was in the middle of a zombie apocalypse where I don't feel like I can trust anyone, like how would I, as Katelyn, act? And
Mm,
that kind of brings along a different character because obviously I've never experienced those things, so I'm going to act very differently in my
Yeah,
day
yeah.
than it is.
Mm.
Um, so it kind of started like that, and then I think it more with learning and stuff and taking different classes, it more developed of like, okay, well, let's really dive into specifics of how they reacted. It's all still of like, well, how would my body react to these situations? But it's
Mm.
just going into more detail. So I have more to draw from, I would say.
Yeah. Um, what about like how do you balance portraying intense emotional roles with protecting your own mental health as well? Because Enid had quite a dark story in The Walking Dead, and when you portray horror characters, it's like I'm sure it can affect you mentally, reading certain things and watching them. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I remember, I think it was the day, because again, like Walking Dead was like that was my first big job. Honestly, like my first job where I had more than like 5 lines, you know? And so there was a lot of new things I was experiencing for the first time. And the scene where I watched my parents get eaten, I remember that day I went home and I still was holding on to those emotions throughout the day. The next day they
Yeah,
were
it was
gone.
brutal. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, because again, like when I do it, I'm putting myself in that situation. So I'm
Mm.
visualizing my parents in that situation. Um, and it just, I mean, again, it's like it takes practice, you know? And at the end of the day, though, like when you're on set and in that situation, like you do feel very safe. At least, the set that I was on, I was able
Yeah.
to feel very safe, which I was very grateful for. Um, but once you finish the scene, I that's the only time that it's really stuck with me a
Yeah.
lot. But luckily, like, I can listen to music or I can talk to friends and you can realize pretty quickly, hey, this is not my reality. That
Mm.
makes sense. So just making sure you're keeping in touch with reality when you're still doing all this deep and
Yeah.
heavy.
Yeah, yeah, it's a mixture of just like on and off screen, really, isn't it? And on and
Yeah,
off
yeah.
character. Yeah. Did you ever feel any pressure stepping into a popular show like The Walking Dead? Like, did you ever feel a lot of pressure with the fan base?
Um, I remember there was people weren't exactly thrilled that I was coming in because everyone really liked Carl,
Mm,
and there was a lot of girls that had a crush on him, and so I think they didn't know anything about my character, what she was going to do. Like I wasn't even sure if I was going to be connected with him or not.
yeah,
Um, but I think they just saw a girl around his age and they were like, she better not go after Carl. I'm gonna get her.
yeah. They
But
take it so seriously, don't they?
yeah,
Like it's real life. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
um, but that was kind of it. Like it definitely was intimidating. Like, I think I had just turned 15 when I
mm,
booked the role. So I was very young and it was a big deal, but at the same time, like I was just doing what I love to do for fun. You know what I
mm,
mean? And I got to do it a lot more and such a bigger scale as well.
yeah,
That it was also very, very exciting. And I was lucky enough to where, the cast and crew were just all so, so welcoming, especially because I'm
yeah,
so shy.
yeah.
Because it's all these like very established, mainly adults
Mm.
on this set. But they were all
Mainstream
so
actors as well, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. And so it was definitely a little intimidating, but
mm,
it wasn't for long. Like everyone made me
yeah,
feel so welcomed and like I was meant to be there, or supposed to be there. And I mean, I took the opportunity and I learned as much as I could. And then I was lucky enough to be able to go to these conventions and meet a lot of the fans, and they were all just so welcoming as well
yeah,
and so kind and sweet. Like they just love the show and they, you know, it it's hard to describe like the kind of acceptance,
Mm,
that I received at least. It was
yeah.
amazing.
It must be quite hard to control it online though, as well, with the 1 million followers that you got. It's like,
Yeah,
yeah, it must be
I
surreal.
always, I think it's more a mental thing. I always get nervous that like people are gonna say weird stuff.
Mm,
And like people have, but that was like, I don't know what happened. Like maybe the internet's evolving or something, but like everyone is so nice on my
mm.
socials. Maybe I'm not seeing the bad stuff, but like everyone is so
Yeah.
kind. And like, especially because there was a time, I think when the pandemic hit, like I was not very active on there just because
Mm,
like there's other stuff in the world to be worried about. But I started recently getting more active and like really going through the comments and stuff like that. And everyone was so
yeah.
nice.
Yeah.
I was honestly surprised because, like, especially as a kid, like when I was first starting Walking Dead and like first got on social media, like there were some like not nice comments,
Yeah.
some really creepy ones, some really weird ones. Um, and so I just kind of taught myself, hey, like you just don't read those things because you
Yeah.
never know what you're going to see and you never know like how upsetting it could be. It's just not worth it. Um, but recently I've started again and like literally everyone's so kind and
Yeah.
it like warms my heart. I think I don't know, there was just one day where I was tearing up because like everyone was just so kind and supportive. Like it just for me being me and it was kind of shocking and I don't know. I'm really grateful
Mm.
that all my fans are so sweet.
That's good. It's nice. It sounds like you
Yeah.
love them, so that's nice to hear. It's because,
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah.
Well, because like at the end of the day, like you know what I mean. Like they don't know me. They don't see me every day. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like, and the fact that they're willing to give like a quasi stranger such kindness is they don't have to do that, and
yeah.
that's very sweet, and it's very it creates a lot of optimism for
Yeah.
as a society, and especially on social media, which can be such like a nasty place.
Mhm. No, of course. Did you ever watch the show before you joined, just out of interest? Did you ever watch the series or know much about it?
I watched I because it was filmed in Georgia and I grew up there. So like I heard about it all the time. It was huge in
Yeah.
Georgia. But I was really young when it first came out. I was like 10 years old. And I think like maybe a year or two after it first came out, I was like, you know what? I hear about this all the time. Um, why don't I just watch an episode? And so
Mm.
I watched the first episode, and then I think they like started tearing the horse apart and like tearing its guts out. And I was
Yeah.
like, too young to watch this. I was like, I don't think I can finish this episode.
Yeah.
So I honestly I didn't watch it just because I was so young and it wasn't something I was super interested in because of the gore. But once I booked the role, I was like, okay, well, I gotta watch the show now.
Mm.
And so I think I don't know. I binged like because what season? I came in five, so I think there was four seasons on Netflix. So I binged the first four seasons in like a week and a
Mm.
half. And I was obsessed with it. I was like, oh my god, this is. I was like, no wonder this show is so popular. It's
Yeah.
so good.
It gets like that, doesn't
Yeah,
it, when something's so good? It's like there's
yeah,
nothing else of interest, really. It's like, yeah.
yeah. Oh, I was obsessed with it. It was
Mm.
so easy to binge in the first place. Like, let alone I didn't have to binge it. I just genuinely enjoyed
Yeah.
watching it. The writing is just phenomenal. The way that they show humanity on that show and every aspect of it was just so good.
Mm. Wow. So, considering we're on the subject of Enid, I mean, I've got a few questions about her and her character. I
Yeah,
know obviously everyone knows she died, but we can imagine she's still alive in some of them. um,
yeah.
like to get it started with, how do you think Enid, managed to survive on her own for so long, before joining Alexandra?
Man, if it was me, wouldn't have happened. I would not have
Okay.
made it as long as she would have. Um, I think she honestly, I think she had really great parents that probably taught her everything that she needed to know in case they were ever gone. Um, because otherwise, I don't know how she would have survived otherwise. I think really that mantra of just survive somehow kept her alive for a long time. I think it didn't keep her in the healthiest mindset, but in the
Yeah.
pandemic, alive, mental health, you kind of got to pick one over the other sometimes. Um, and I think she just that girl has like she's resilient, you
Mm,
know? She's a fighter. She does not give up. She refuses to give up even when other people tell her to or try to force her to. Um, she's just resilient. I don't think she would ever let her parents' death go into vain. You know what I mean? I think she needed to live on for those people, which Glenn even taught her, you know, the reason we survive is so that we can tell the tales of the people that have already that can't, you know, anymore,
yeah.
the people that have passed. And I think that really resonated with her as well, which just made her push even more.
Mm. Yeah, how did her relationships with Carl and Maggie and the other cast shape who she was? Like, how did they? Yeah,
I think once her parents passed away, I think Enid was kind of in the mindset of like, okay, cool. So I just can't let anyone into my life or close to me again that I care about, because I'm going to lose them. So I think it was really hard at first because she has this internal battle of, well, you know, it would be nice to like have conversations with people, but at the same time, I don't want to get too close to anyone because I'll probably just lose them. But luckily, she kind of met her match and Maggie and Carl and Glenn, who weren't really going to let that happen. Um, and I think they showed her that I mean, she's even, you know, said this before, especially with Carl, that there's more to life than just surviving. Like, if you're alive, you should live it. You
mm,
should have a life, you know. And I think in the later seasons, we started to see that where she wasn't like fighting to survive so much. She just started to try to like live a normal life as best as she knew how to, which is huge. It was a full 180
yeah.
thanks to those people.
So I got another one as well. I know you mentioned the intro of your character at the start when you was in the car, and then there was mention another one. I'm trying to remember it. Oh no, it was when you died as well. That's obviously one of the scary parts. But what's the scariest moment Enid faced during the apocalypse and being in the show?
Um, oh God. I mean, probably I would say honestly, losing people was the scariest thing for her. Um, like when all the zombies got into Alexandria and Maggie was stuck, and then Glenn almost got killed and stuff, and then finding out that Carl died, and then Alden getting captured by the Whisperers. Like all of her fears were, all of the biggest fears were around losing people. Walkers, stuff like that. That's her day-to-day life. Like there's nothing scary about it. It's just kind of the world that you live in now. Um, but losing people, that I think that's always been her biggest fear.
Yeah. If Enid was in charge of Hilltop, oh, there's a bit of an echo. I'm trying to see if it stops.
Oh, sorry.
No,
Here,
you're
I'll
right.
turn my volume down.
Yeah, that's cool. If Enid was in charge of the Hilltop, do you think she would have handled the Whisperers differently? Is there a different way she would have
Yeah, she would have tried to.
handled it?
I mean, she would probably try to kill him like right away.
Yeah,
I don't think there'd be any negotiations, anything like that. Like, it's like, okay, these people are like wearing dead people's skin. I don't know why we're negotiating. Like, we should just
yeah,
kill all these people. Um, I mean, like, I don't think Enid would be ready for a, you know, leadership role. I think at that point in her life when the Whisperer showed up, she really was just trying to like live a normal life. Um, so I don't think she would want to make that decision. But at the end of the day, it's like, hey, they stole my guy. They're
yeah,
threatening to kill him, and they're wearing dead people's faces. Why let's not deal with these people as I would like to deal with these people as little as possible.
yeah. And it could have been dealt with more quickly as well. Oh, there's still an echo, I think. Yeah, no,
Sorry
sorry,
about
no,
that.
you're right. I mean, they could have dealt with them more quickly as well, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean it's hard. Like they were crazy. Like it's not like they were easy to fight or anything like that. And then
Mm,
you're basically trying to wage a war when we've like just started figuring things out again and building our society. So it's a hard decision. I know I just know Enid wouldn't have wanted to deal with them at all.
Mm.
So whichever conclusion got them there the fastest, that's the one she would have taken.
Do you think she would have let? Do you think Eden would have let Eden? Do you think Enid would have let
Okay.
Negan? I'm gonna start that again. Do you think
You're good.
Enid? Do you think Enid would have let Negan live? Um, yeah,
Um, no.
yeah.
I like I'm shocked that Maggie did. Mm, I don't know. It's because also at the same time, Enid didn't kill a lot of live people, but at the same time, he he killed Glenn,
Mm,
which was devastating. I think there would be a big struggle for her because at the same time, it's like, what does taking a life for another life do? I think he would really have to show that he's not just gonna like beat people's heads in with a bat for no reason. And then maybe she would think about it. But like if there's no change, there's no point in this. Like you're just causing more death in a world that already has so much of it.
mm.
There's no point of you continuing that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, of course. How are we doing with the questions, by the way? I just want to make sure
Oh,
I'm
they're
not taking up
great.
too
I
much
love
time, or if it's,
them.
I don't know if you get bored talking about a character.
No, no,
Yeah,
no, it's good. I
yeah.
haven't talked about her in so long
Mm.
too, so it's been good to revisit a lot of this
And it's
stuff.
good to recap the new generation that are watching it as well, anyway. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I always think about that because you know it's on Netflix, AMC Plus, like it's there forever, and
Mm.
so new people get to watch it all the time. And it's so cool. I love that we have this media that just exists forever. We think, I mean, you can think about that with books as well. You know, every new generation is going to read the same books.
Mm. Yeah, no, it's true. So going back anyway, how did Carl's death affect Enid's outlook on the survival in the future, do you think?
At first it was not good. I don't, she was not doing well. I don't think she was taking it well at all because, I mean, besides Maggie, that was the only other person she had really gotten close with. And like her biggest fear did happen. He passed away. And so I think it was a real struggle, but at the same time, it's, you know, you can decide to live your life in this depression that will eventually take your own or eat away at yours to where you're not really living anymore. Or you decide to, again, honor the dead and continue living and continue telling their story and having them live through you. And I think, you know, eventually she was able to find that and figure that out. I think Michonne helped her a lot as
Yeah,
well with trying to figure that out, especially because Michonne had such a close relationship with Carl. Um, I think it took a lot of time and a lot of work for her to heal through that and figure out, you know, what's a great way to honor the life that he lived. And
mm.
that's by continuing to live.
Yeah, such an emotional moment it was.
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah.
very much so.
Mm. Does she think people in the apocalypse, lose parts of their humanity, or do they simply adapt to survive?
Ah, I don't know. I think everyone goes through their own journey. Um, I think I think a lot of it depends on how strong your will is. And it's not just your will to survive, but your will to live. Because there is a difference. If your will to survive is strong, then you're going to do heinous things. I also think in the apocalypse, there's so many opportunities for people to see such traumatic events or experience such traumatic events that can really mess with your mental health. And it's not
Yeah.
like you have a huge access to therapists
No.
or medication in the apocalypse.
Yeah, no, of course.
Um, so I think it's very easy to lose your humanity.
Mm.
I think a lot of people would. Um, but I do think there are some people that can choose to find the good in the terrible. And those are the people that can survive and have their humanity and find a way to live a humane life in a messed up world. If that makes
Yeah,
sense.
of course. but does Enid think the hilltop or Alexandra, you know, does Enid think the hilltop or Alexandra's leadership ever failed its people?
Um, I mean, I think honestly, I think Enid thought Alexandria was a joke when she first got there. It's like, yeah, it's comfortable, you have running water, toilets and stuff like that, but at the same time, it's not reality. Like you're ignoring, you have this wall up around you and you're completely ignoring the outside world and what's actually going on around us. And a lot of those people had never really experienced the apocalypse. Um, so I think in that way of ignoring it and pretending like it doesn't exist, that's not going to do anything. Like you're going to get bit in the butt, basically.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but I think, and then Gregory was just an idiot.
yeah.
He was just a douchebag. And there was no need for him to be in power. He was a bad man. I think he just had a lot of greed. Um, and so I think once the people that, you know, didn't have a realistic view of the world that they were actually living in, once those people were weeded out, I think, and our group took over, I think we were able to build, a society worth living in. You see how they grew over the time jump and everything. Like it was very prosperous. So I
Mm.
think they did a good job. I think we did a good job.
Yeah,
People before did,
amazing job.
not so much.
Amazing. I mean, the audience is just it's surreal, the show. It's like, you can watch it so many times and keep going with it. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just because it's one of the first of its kind too, to like really take a look at, hey, what would life be if the world was like falling apart around us and was trying to kill us at the same
Mm.
time? And how would that work and how would people go about it? And to see like from day one basically to where we ended up and rebuilding society, it's really cool. It's crazy that they were able to cover all of that.
Mm. Yeah, there's a lot in there that's quite detailed that, in
Yeah,
reality can happen in a different way, as well.
yeah.
Do you think there could be a zombie outbreak in real life? Do you think that's a bit far-fetched, or do you think a
Yeah,
disease could cause it?
I don't know how it would happen. Well, because The Last of Us, they say there's that fungus and stuff like that, and they
Yeah.
say that the world is heating up and there are fungus like that that are surviving more often. And I'm like, okay, well, that's terrifying.
Mm.
Um, I I don't know. It would be very odd for all of a sudden, it would have to be some kind of crazy, crazy disease for. I don't know if people would be dead though. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I guess they would technically be brain dead, but like how does that work to where they're still able to move around? I know the fungus, like they can take over insects and they basically just use the mobility part of the brain and then everything else is dead. So like maybe it is something like that. I hope not.
Mm.
I hope
Yeah.
at least in my lifetime I never have to experience a zombie apocalypse because that would just be, I don't know, it would be terrible.
We would all need to be Negan, I think. Yeah, yeah, if it happened. No,
Yeah.
do you think these like diseases are man-made? Do you think it's planned? Just because you brought up COVID earlier as well,
Mhm.
on a personal
Do
perspective.
I think the zombie disease was
No,
man-made?
no, because that's not real yet. I mean, like, I mean,
Yeah.
like the reality of COVID and stuff, in general. Do you think that was all man-made and planned?
I mean, I have no clue. So there's so much information from each side of it. At the same time, it's like cold and flus and viruses, they're always going to evolve to
Mm,
where, they can survive because they're basically parasites. Like it's going to find a way to live in some way. It's like humanity. Like we're always going to find a way to live in some way. Um, and so that's why you can, for certain times, it's like you can only take a certain amount of antibiotics until they stop working as well, if that makes
mm,
sense, because the virus eventually is going to learn it. And um, It's the same with the flu, you know, you get a different kind of flu shot each season because it always changes and evolves in order to try to survive. So I honestly, I have no clue.
Mm.
It could be one or the other. I know that, what is it? What do they call it? Like not medical warfare or whatever, but chemical warfare or something where they
Yeah.
create diseases and stuff like that. I know that people do work on that, and that's a possibility. I don't know if that was this situation. Um, I have no clue. I
Mm.
also like. I think at the same time, it's like the pandemic was already rough enough as it is. I wasn't so worried about how it started, just more of like how are we going to get out of this?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's scary. Um, yeah. I mean, going back to the Walking Dead though, do you think you could have survived the Alpha scene? You know, when you got killed off, do you think she would have made it any
No.
further? Yeah.
I would need a lot of help to survive. I don't know. Like, it's also just like, especially in those first few years, I don't know if that's a world I want to live in. You know what I mean? Like, it's, I don't know. I don't know. I think it would take a long time before I would feel safe again. And it's like, well, how long am I able to wait for that, if that
Yeah.
makes sense? And then I also have to survive. I have to not die, which sucks. That's
Yeah.
not exactly easy to do in an apocalypse. I think it'd be very difficult. I would definitely need help. I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. I think a lot of people would hopefully need help. Because you do it on your own is a lot, especially just mentally. So like maybe, but like
Yeah.
I'm not gonna say I have a high chance of survival
No.
either.
Yeah. No, of course. I mean, it sounds like you were sort of ready for your character to end in a way. Would you say you was ready for it to end?
Yeah. I mean, I think Enid, I wish she could have had more time in that time of peace, where she actually felt settled and like wasn't just fighting to live anymore. I wish she could have had more time in peace, but I'm glad that she at least got to experience it before she went, and she got to experience what life was like living again, before she left and not having to just survive, which was great.
Yeah.
I'm glad she got to have
Yeah.
that.
Do you still believe in the JSS philosophy? Yeah.
Oh yeah, I love that philosophy. I was so honored that I got to have that as a part of my storyline. Because there are times like, especially during the pandemic where it's like, okay, I just like I gotta put my head down and just push through this.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people kind of resonated with that too, of like, there's no like, why would I give up? I mean, there is a lot to live for, and there's people to live for. And so I just got to keep pushing. And I think, even in the day to day, when you're just not having a very good day, it's like, okay, just put my head down, get going. And then once I have this figured out, once this is done, then I can like take a deep breath.
Yeah. Wow. So I've got one more question, or maybe two more questions.
Mhm.
What's your favorite Rick Grimes quote from The Walking Dead?
Oh,
You can look online if you want. It's
no.
pre-recorded.
I mean, the first one I can think of is "We Are the Walking Dead." I loved that. I thought that was so badass. I'd probably say that one. He did a lot. Like, if you think about that character, like, God, I mean, he just pushed people through he got through so many people through so much crap.
Yeah.
He was a great man in that apocalypse. So just about every word is honestly a good word out of his mouth.
Yeah. Yeah. And what's your personal favorite line? Just out of curiosity, your from your character.
Oh, one of my favorites was it's because it was one of my first like lines where I was like, "Oh, that's so cool, Enid." But it's their world. We're just living in it. And I thought that was very interesting because, the walkers did kind of just take over the world, and we had to figure out a way to survive around them, and maneuver around them. And they kind of took over, and I was like, oh, that's very accurate. So I do. I do love that quote.
Wow.
And it was one of my like first, because I think that was one of my first scenes where I was like having lines and stuff like that. And so I thought that was a cool line, and it's always stuck with me.
Definitely. All the scenes just get you going. It's surreal to look back on as well, especially when you see them
Oh
online all
yeah,
the time. Yeah.
I love looking back on it. It's so, because it's been a while. Like, it's been like 10 years since I started the
Yeah.
show, and like, I don't know what, 5 since I left. So
Yeah.
I talk about it less and less as the
It
years go
doesn't feel
on. So
like
it's
five though,
nice to
does it?
revisit.
It's crazy.
Huh?
It doesn't feel like 5 years though. No.
No, it's because of the pandemic really messed up
Mm.
any kind of semblance of how time passes.
Yeah.
It made time go like that, basically.
Mm.
Or it makes time now feel like it's going so fast because everything was so slow right then.
Mm.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like 5 years. And I think because it's still so relevant too. Like you have so many shows that are still coming out, and people still talk about it, which is crazy. It's beautiful. I love that people, it resonated with so many people
Mm.
for good
No, of
reason. It was
course.
good writing.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for coming on. Is there anything else you would like to say to your fans, even to this day? Is there anything you'd like to tell them that you haven't told them
Yeah,
yet?
I mean, I guess just look on my socials for any projects that might be coming out. I appreciate everyone. I
Yeah,
appreciate everyone, putting the time aside to be so kind and generous. It's really beautiful, and yeah, I appreciate everything.
amazing. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been an
Yeah,
honor to
thank you
talk
for
to you.
having me.
Yeah.